I held out my hand, ready to greet the incoming CEO. And that was all it took for the chairman to decide I didn't belong in that room. He didn't look at my face first. He looked at my hand, then at the folder tucked neatly under my arm, then at the flowers I was holding, white lilies and eucalyptus, the kind assistants order when they want a room to feel welcoming for a big announcement. The cameras were already rolling, red lights on, 3 angles, one for the internal stream, one for external investors, one for the archive no one thinks about until something turns into a scandal. I stepped forward beside his chair, extended my hand, and said evenly, "Welcome to Halcyon Dynamics," before the new CEO could respond. The chairman turned his head, took in the gesture, and gave a small, deliberate scoff into his lapel mic. "I don't shake hands with low-level employees." He said it clearly, not loud but loud enough. The reaction was immediate. A couple of board members smirked. Someone halfway down the table let out that nervous laugh people use when they know something's wrong but don't want to be the first to say it. At the back of the room, one of the communication staff tried to hide his grin behind a folder, as if that would somehow erase what the cameras were already capturing from 3 different angles. The incoming CEO, Daniel Hart, shifted in his seat. His eyes flicked toward me, then dropped to the table. I didn't pull my hand back. Not yet. For a brief second. The chairman seemed bothered by that. His smile tightened just slightly. His eyes moved from my hand to my face, as if checking whether I had misunderstood the hierarchy he had just announced to the entire room. The flowers felt heavier in my arm. "I'm here as instructed," I said, keeping my voice calm. He leaned back in his chair, not even trying to hide the contempt. "Then stand where you're told," he replied. "This meeting is for executives," someone near the end of the table muttered. Awkward. Just loud enough for a neighbor to hear and for the nearest mic to catch. I lowered my hand, but on my terms, not his. I placed the flowers on the table, right at the edge of his line of sight. Then I walked to the empty seat at the far end of the boardroom and sat down. No one stopped me. No one asked who I was. No one corrected the assumption. The laughter lingered for a second longer, thinner now, stretched over the silence that followed. "Let's begin," the chairman said, already turning toward the main screen. The first slide appeared. Logo, date, Halcyon Dynamics Leadership Transition and Capital Structure. Update. I leaned back slightly in my chair and waited. Let them get through the title first, before proceeding. Take a moment to sign up, but only if you believe that small moments can change everything. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what the temperature is like there right now. It's always interesting to see how far this story reaches. This is a fictional story, inspired by real emotions and situations, with a few AI-enhanced details to make it more vivid and engaging. Now, sit back, get comfortable, and let's continue. I let the silence sit for just a moment longer than they were comfortable with. Then I spoke. "Before you go any further," I said, calm enough that no one could mistake it for emotion, "there's something you should know." The chairman didn't even try to hide his irritation this time. He turned slowly, like I had interrupted something important rather than necessary. "We're not taking input from staff during this session," he said. "You can pass your notes to investor relations afterward." A few people nodded, relieved to return to something familiar: hierarchy, control, assumptions that didn't require thinking. I met his eyes. "If you're refusing to shake my hand," I said, my voice steady, measured, "then by tomorrow morning, $2.3 billion will no longer be part of this deal." The room didn't react immediately. That was the first sign something had shifted. Not outrage, not disbelief. Just a pause, like the air had been pulled out and replaced with something heavier. Then, predictably, someone laughed. Too loud, too forced. "All right," one of the directors said, waving a hand as if brushing away a minor inconvenience. "That's enough. Let's keep this professional," another added, eager to restore the rhythm. The chairman smiled again, but this time it looked thinner, less certain. "Sit down," he said. "We're already behind schedule. I already am." I replied. A few heads turned, not all of them, but enough. They didn't understand yet. To them, I was still just a disruption, a minor annoyance, someone who had stepped out of line without realizing how these rooms worked. They moved on like nothing had happened. That was the part people outside rooms like this never understand. When something uncomfortable appears, the instinct isn't to confront it, it's to bury it under momentum. "Let's continue," the chairman said, already turning back to the screen. The CFO began walking through the numbers, debt schedules, projected cash flow, restructuring timelines, clean slides, confident tone, a story built on the assumption that everything was already secured. No one asked about the $2.3 billion. No one asked who I was. They chose not to, because acknowledging either would mean admitting that something fundamental might be wrong. If you think that being in a higher position allows people to look down on others, write "true" in the comments. If you believe that a person's value doesn't lie in their title, feel free to write "believe." I will read all comments. I watched them closely. The way the chairman nodded along, as if nothing had interrupted his control. The way a few board members leaned back, reassured by familiar language percentages, forecasts, safe abstractions. The way Daniel Hart kept his eyes fixed on the deck, avoiding even a glance in my direction. It wasn't ignorance. It was decision. They had already written the narrative. I didn't fit into it, so they continued as if I didn't matter, at one point. As the CFO clicked to the next slide, he hesitated just slightly. His eyes flicked toward me, then toward the chairman. "A small crack. Before we finalize this section," he said carefully, "we still need confirmation on the primary capital release." The chairman didn't look at him. "Legal is handling it," he said flatly. "We've covered that. With respect," the CFO replied, choosing his words with precision. "The release requires direct authorization." A pause. "Subtle, but real." "From legal," the chairman repeated. "Sharper this time." The CFO shook his head. "Just once." "From the capital controller." The room shifted. Chairs adjusted. Pens stopped. A few heads turned not toward the screen this time, but toward me. I met their eyes without moving. The chairman followed their gaze. Slower this time, and for the first time since I had walked into the room. He didn't look at the flowers. He looked at me. Really looked, as if trying to reconcile the version of me he had already dismissed with something that suddenly didn't fit. And just like that, the certainty in the room began to thin. "And who exactly are you here for?" he asked. The question carrying more dismissal than curiosity. It wasn't really a question. It was a correction, a way to put me back where he thought I belonged. I didn't answer immediately, not because I didn't have one, but because timing matters more than words in rooms like this. "I'm here for the capital," I said. A few people exchanged glances. The chairman let out a short, humorless breath. "That's already being handled," he replied. "Thank you." He turned back toward the screen, signaling the conversation was over. But it wasn't. "At the risk of repeating myself," the CFO said carefully, still holding on to that thin thread of unease. "The authorization hasn't been finalized." The chairman's jaw tightened. "We've reviewed this for months." "Yes," the CFO said, "but the release requires direct confirmation from the authorized signatory." Silence followed. Not loud, not dramatic. Just enough to force attention back into the space no one wanted to look at. The chairman's eyes moved again. Slower this time. Back toward me. "Are you suggesting," he said, choosing each word, "that this process depends on you?" I met his gaze without shifting. "I'm saying," I replied, "that I'm the managing partner authorized to release the $2.3 billion. No one spoke. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for clarification because it already understands. A director near the middle leaned forward slightly. "You control the full commitment," he asked. "All of it," I said. The CFO nodded once, confirming what I had just said without needing to repeat it. The primary tranche, he added quietly, is entirely under her authority. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Posture changed, expressions recalibrated. People who hadn't looked at me before were looking now not at the flowers, not at the empty seat I had taken, but at me. The chairman straightened in his chair, the confidence in his expression tightening into something more controlled. Then perhaps, he said slowly, we should restart this conversation properly. I let that sit for a moment, because what had just changed wasn't my position. They tried to regain control of the room. That was the instinct. Reset the tone, reframe the moment, pretend the shift hadn't already happened. Let's stay focused, the chairman said. His voice measured now. Careful. We're here to finalize alignment, but alignment requires clarity, and clarity had just arrived in a form they weren't prepared for. The CFO adjusted the papers in front of him, buying himself a second before continuing. There is one item we still need to formally acknowledge, he said. The chairman didn't look at him. We've acknowledged everything, the conduct provision. The CFO added, that got attention. Not loud, not dramatic, but visible. A director flipped through the printed agreement, scanning until he found the section, reputational conduct, capital withdrawal rights. He read under his breath. The incoming CEO leaned forward slightly. What exactly does that mean, he asked. The CFO answered carefully. It ties capital deployment to conduct during negotiations and closing. Any documented behavior that materially harms the company's reputational standing allows for immediate withdrawal of funds. A pause. It doesn't require intent, another director added. Reading further. Only impact. And documentation. The chairman gave a dismissive wave. Standard language. He said, we include that in most agreements. It was revised. The CFO replied, at the request of the capital provider. At my request, I didn't rush to say it. But I didn't avoid it either. I insisted on that clause. I said, now every eye in the room was fully on me. The chairman turned slightly, studying me again, but differently this time. Not dismissing, not overlooking, evaluating. You were concerned about optics, he asked. I was concerned about behavior, I said. He leaned back, a faint scoff escaping before he could stop it. This is becoming a distraction. No, I replied. It's becoming relevant. A director glanced toward the camera, mounted in the corner of the room. The red light was still on, recording everything. For transparency, no one mentioned it out loud. They didn't need to, because suddenly, the clause wasn't just text buried in a contract. It was present, active, and waiting. They tried to move past it. That was the natural reaction: minimize, redirect, contain. Let's take a short recess, the chairman said, tapping the table lightly as if resetting the room would reset reality. 10 minutes. Then we finish this. Chairs shifted back almost immediately. Conversations sparked in low tones. People stood too quickly, gathering papers they didn't need, checking phones that had already started lighting up. No one looked directly at me on the way out. Not out of disrespect this time. Out of calculation, distance, in moments like this. Feels safer. I stayed seated for a second longer, watching the room empty in fragments. Who moved first? Who hesitated? Who avoided eye contact? Who glanced back just once? As if trying to reassess everything they thought they understood. Then I stood, picked up my folder, and walked out into the hallway. The air outside felt cooler, quieter. 2 directors stood near the windows, their conversation cutting off the moment they saw me. One of them gave a polite nod that hadn't existed 10 minutes earlier. The chairman walked past me on his phone, voice low, but not low enough. It's just posturing, he said. We'll handle it. He didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge me, still playing the same script. The CFO approached a moment later. More cautious. Nova, he said, lowering his voice. We should talk before we go back in. Not now, I replied. He nodded once, understanding more than he said, and stepped back. I moved toward a quieter corner near the service elevators and took out my phone. No hesitation. One number. It rang once. Yeah, came the voice on the other end. Activate the withdrawal, I said. Effective immediately. A pause. Not confusion, confirmation. All of it, he asked. All of it. I said. Coded under conduct during negotiations. Documentation is clear. Another brief silence. You're certain, he asked. Yes. That was all. The line disconnected. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle instead of rush. When I stepped back into the room, nothing on the surface had changed. Chairs were back in place, water glasses refilled, conversations lowered to a controlled, almost artificial calm. The chairman glanced up briefly as I took my seat again, as if acknowledging me now cost him something. We'll resume, he said. Let's stay focused. I placed my phone face down on the table. Didn't touch it again. Didn't need to. The presentation returned to the screen. Charts, timelines, projections built on assumptions that were no longer true. On this slide, the CFO began. His voice steady at first. You can see the liquidity runway with the Pelion capital commitment. His phone buzzed. He stopped mid-sentence, looked down. Something in his expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. The kind of shift that doesn't need explanation to be understood. Another phone buzzed. Then another, a quiet chain reaction. Let's silence devices, the chairman said sharply. We're in the middle of a meeting. No one moved to silence anything. The CFO was still staring at his screen. Then, at the next notification that came in, the color drained from his face in real time. Is there a problem? The chairman asked. Irritation creeping back in. The CFO swallowed. The primary tranche, he said slowly, as if choosing words that didn't want to be spoken, has been withdrawn. The room didn't erupt. It tightened. Withdrawn how the chairman asked. Executed. The CFO replied. Full amount. 2.3 billion. That's not possible. One of the directors said quickly. We're mid-process. We were. The CFO corrected quietly. Not anymore. Every eye in the room turned. Not toward the screen. Toward me. The chairman stood up abruptly. The control he'd been trying to reassemble slipping again. You can't just pull that kind of capital, he said. I didn't raise my voice. I already did. Silence followed. Not confusion this time. Recognition. You signed. He said. We had an agreement. There was a clause. I replied. He shook his head. This is an overreaction. No. I said. This is a consequence. Somewhere in the room. A phone started ringing instead of buzzing. Then another. The outside world was catching up. And inside that room, they were finally beginning to understand what had already happened. The room didn't explode. It unraveled. Not with shouting, not with chaos, at least not at first. It happened in smaller ways, subtle fractures spreading faster than anyone could contain them. Phones were no longer just buzzing. They were ringing. Assistants, banks, external investors, people who weren't in the room but suddenly needed answers from those who were. Put them on silent, the chairman snapped. But no one listened this time. Pre-market indicators are reacting. Someone near the middle of the table said, voice low but urgent. How bad? Another asked. A glance at a screen, a hesitation. Double digits. He said, down. The incoming CEO leaned back, running a hand across his face as if trying to steady something that had already tipped. This can be fixed, the chairman insisted, looking around for agreement, for support, anything that would restore control. We clarify the situation. We issue a statement. It's already documented. One of the directors said quietly. That landed harder than anything else. Not loud, just precise. Another director shifted in his seat. This happened during a live session. He added, in front of the incoming CEO, on record. No one laughed now. No one looked away. The chairman's jaw tightened. It was a comment. He said, taken out of context, it was conduct. Someone replied, And now it has a price. The distinction mattered. Outside, the market was reacting to numbers. Inside, they were finally reacting to behavior. The chairman slammed his hand lightly against the table, trying to regain authority. "This meeting is suspended," he said. "No," the lead independent director replied. Calm but firm, "It isn't." That was the moment everything shifted again. Not because of what was said, but because of who said it. "We are obligated to address governance," the director continued. "Now?" A pause followed. Short, final. The chairman looked around the table, searching for alignment that no longer existed. "You're not serious," he said. No one answered. They didn't need to, because the room had already moved past him, and for the first time since I walked in. The power he thought he held wasn't there anymore. What followed wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors, no sudden declarations like you see in movies. It was quieter than that. More controlled, more final. Boards don't revolt, they proceed. They reference bylaws. They call for review. They use language that sounds neutral, but carries weight when applied at the right moment. "Extraordinary session," the lead director said. A few heads nodded. Papers shifted. Phones lowered. Attention narrowed. The chairman remained standing for a second longer than necessary, as if refusing to accept that the room had already moved without him. "This is unnecessary," he said. "We can resolve this internally." No one responded, because internally had already failed. A director across the table spoke next. Voice even. "We're addressing governance exposure," another added, "and reputational risk." The words weren't emotional. They were procedural, which made them impossible to argue with. The chairman looked around again, searching for support, not loyalty, just alignment. Someone to slow this down, redirect it, buy him time. But time was already gone. Within minutes. Motions were made, seconded, recorded, each step small on its own, but together forming something irreversible. The decision didn't come as a shock. It arrived as a conclusion. The board places the chairman on administrative leave, effective immediately. The lead director said. No one objected, not even him, because at some point, even denial runs out of space. The incoming CEO's appointment was suspended pending review. A committee was formed, language carefully chosen to reassess structure, leadership, and external partnerships. They moved efficiently, not because they wanted to, because they had to. Self-preservation doesn't hesitate when the cost becomes visible. Eventually, the room settled into a different kind of silence, not uncertainty, aftermath. And in that silence, what had been power just an hour ago was now absence. They asked me to stay. Not directly at first. It came in careful language. Softer tone, different posture. We can find a path forward, the lead director said when we stepped into a smaller room. Revised terms, governance changes, greater oversight. I listened. Then I shook my head. This isn't about structure, I said. It's about culture. He paused, searching for a counterpoint. We can correct that. He insisted. You can try. I replied. But I won't be the one paying to find out. That was the end of it, by the afternoon. The story was already out. Headlines focused on the numbers, the withdrawal, the disruption. Analysts debated whether it was too extreme. It wasn't. It was precise. Later, a message came through from Daniel. I should have said something. I looked at it for a moment before replying. You had the moment, I wrote. You chose not to use it. No anger, just clarity. Because in rooms like that, power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it sits quietly at the far end of the table, waiting to see how you treat it. And sometimes, the price of getting that wrong is more than anyone in the room can afford. I learned that real power isn't in titles or loud voices. It's in knowing your worth and having the courage to walk away when that value is ignored. In that moment, I didn't lose anything. I protected everything that mattered. If you were in my position, would you choose to walk away? If yes, write yes. If you'd stay, write no. Or share your other options. I genuinely want to hear your thinking. Your voice might inspire someone else facing the same choice. If this story meant something to you, subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share, because you might be the reason someone finds the strength they need today.